Hey, Kevin, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Well, chuffed to be on the show, Brian. Big fan of it. So, do you know what? Asking for a background for someone of my age, it could take up the whole show. That's one of the problems. Yeah, a lot of the youngsters today think I'm a dinosaur, but I'm a young dinosaur. But anyway, so my sales career started way back. 84 was when I first became a sales guy for tech giant Ericsson. And the bit I always laugh at now when I talk to some of the youngsters when we talk about cold calling is they talk about the fear of cold calling on the phone. In 84, cold calling was knocking on the office door and asking to see someone. So if people think it's scary doing it on the phone, you try thinking back that far. So I spent 20 years at Ericsson, rose up through the ranks, did pretty well. Well, I did very well for myself in those days. And got to 37 and said, you know what, it's time to do a startup. Yeah. And I did my first ever startup, and it was really quite cool because didn't realize that at the time what we were doing was going to change the world. And I say that the world in a simple way is that everybody uses mobile phone now and downloads apps. And we were the pioneers of that. Before the App Store and Google Play, you downloaded all that stuff from your mobile operator. So we got a bunch of money from VCs. We went out and we wanted to take on the world. Small company based on the south coast of England. It did well, and we exited in 2006. And since then, I've spent time with a couple of other startups and a short stint back in corporate life. But predominantly, I'm a career sales guy of about 20 years of it in executive sales leadership.
And what was the impetus to start your own thing?
It was a combination of eventually sort of saying, there's only a certain amount of global travel you can do. There's only a certain amount of hotel sleeping and eating and things like that. And that you eventually start to say, well, wouldn't it be nice to start something in a base somewhere? And being SaaS, it means you don't have to move far. But I mentioned earlier about being a sales leader. And like all sales leaders, we spend a lot of time looking at CRM. Yeah. We look at pipelines, forecasts, and things like that. And we're trying to mold it into something that works for the people upstairs, because the crap that the sales guys have put in isn't really usable. And I started looking at CRM. And don't get me wrong, CRM is a useful product. But I started looking at how things had changed. And I was always one of these guys that said, CRM, customer relationship management. Well, how the hell does the R applying that? Because I couldn't see what it did to relationships. No. And we started looking at selling was changing. We all know that now. More buyer-centric market. They expect us to understand their business problems, not focus on product or service. They expect us to help with their process. They expect us to engage with a wider buyer team and understand everybody in it. And I thought, how do you manage that in CRM? Well, you don't. So I went and created a product. And I call it buyer relationship management, because a prospect is a buyer before they're a customer, and not to replace CRM, but to complement it.
Yeah, because I think you solve a couple of problems in that. First, a lot of salespeople don't understand that there's all these people involved in the buying decision. And the buyer probably doesn't even want you to know that sometimes.
Yeah, Spot on. Now, the funny thing is, I talk to people all the time and I say, how many people in your sales cycle? And they go, do you know what, 4 or 6. I'm saying, whoa, I've looked at your product. There's no way there's 4 or 6. What about this? Oh, maybe. And most sales guys, they find a few people that like them, engage with them, and they cling on to them like a sucker fish. And then that's they think this is all going to happen. And I think Gartner described it recently. The buyer team has active buyers and occasional buyers. These occasional buyers that aren't involved in the day-to-day activities but have the power of approval or veto. And most sales guys don't even know who they are. So, but yeah, you're right. There's more people in there. And most sales guys don't know who they are. And most sales leaders don't know that their sales guys don't know it.
Right. That they're all looking for the decision maker. And I keep saying, what decision? The decision to meet with you, the decision to look at the product, the decision to change, the decision to do it now, the decision of whose money we're going to use. All of these are decisions.
It's, you know, there's the terminology now, everyone's using it, consensus-based decision making, that decision makers don't want to make decisions unless everybody's on board, because then they're accountable for everything like that. So the funny thing is, I sell a low-cost product, and I mean low-cost product, and yet it might be a $500 deal, and there'll be 5 people involved.
Easy, yeah.
And you just think, well, you know, I don't want to do this until I know my sales guys like this, or my sales enablement person like that. And, you know, so it's the sign of the times. And someone said that actually authority is now probably less powerful than influence.
I think so.
Yeah, and right. It's spot on.
Because guess what? You know, because I deal a lot with CEOs. They're like, you know, I can't tell you the number of times I've bought a thing that no one uses, because they don't want to change, because we're all selling change, doing something differently. And guess what? Mammals don't like to change. Mammals are very constrained, change conscious. And all of these leaders, these people of power, they don't want to cram it down anyone's throat. Last thing they want to do is spend money, have it not being used, and people hate them. They got to get their job done.
Yeah, I mean, they've learned that low adoption rates or lack of support for things, and eventually say, right, well, I'm going to get all the users on board, or the tire kickers on board, and everybody else on board. And I think it's that. You've mentioned on a previous show about complex sales, that the amount of no decisions, and no decisions is big. And, you know, the complex sale, people say, what's the complex sale? And I say one of the biggest reasons complex sale is because us, people. The more you put in people into it, the more complex it becomes. It's like making a decision on a family. You know, what takeaway meal do you want tonight? Well, I want Chinese, I want Indian, I want pizza. You know, and then you've got to try and build a consensus of, you know, I know I'm simplifying it, but people are complex.
Yes, yeah, and they all have their different agenda. And as sales reps, we're thinking the way we think. We're thinking, oh, it's this quarter, and if we go through this beauty contest, this evaluation, they're going to pick somebody. But that doesn't even make a commitment to change. Just because you win, oh, you won the beauty contest, but you know, we don't have security on board. Or, you know, they push this off to next year.
Change is, you mentioned change management earlier, and change is involved in nearly everything that we sell. One of the things that I always find with change is, in every change management program in a company, there are winners and there are losers. There's someone who gains from it and somebody who gets pain from it, because it could be anything. It might not be that it doesn't advance them, but it's extra workload, they're under-resourced or whatever. And I think that is a big cause for decision. You know, there might be a budget, there might be a need, it's going to solve the problem, but people can't agree. Right. Because the gainers and painers aren't aligned.
That's it. Because somebody isn't going to be needed as much, or isn't going to get a promotion because of it, is going to look stupid, or is going to be marginalized.
It's personal agendas, isn't it, Brian, as well?
Everyone's in the survival mode. We
can't help but have an element of personal emotions and agendas. And I know we're trying to get to a collective yes, but we wouldn't be human if we didn't think about ourselves in the overall scheme of things.
And that's it. And on the forecasting side, managers are just really looking, what's the next step? Well, if you were a chess player and you said, what's your next move? Right? If you're not thinking 2, 3, 5 moves ahead, that next move, you could have 10 reasonable next moves. It's really, what's your strategy? And I think that's one of the things that you focus on, is who are the people, to get an understanding of the field, the game that you're playing. And I think too many of us think of one skill, bring in insight, or lock them out on this thing. No, you have to have a strategy. You have to be thinking ahead.
It's, you know, I always try, and a strategy to me, I have a very simple perspective on it. What and who do you know, and what you're going to do about it? You know, it's nothing complex. Of course, it fleshes out from that. But if you don't know what you need to know, and you don't know who you need to know, you don't know what you need to do. And a strategy is selling complex sales. I say it's like building a jigsaw puzzle. You haven't got all the pieces, you can't put them all together, then you're going to fail. And it is about understanding what's important to everyone. You mentioned earlier on about the agendas and the issues and the concerns of individuals. you have to dig deeper than we've ever had to before. I look back on the old days with, and old days weren't that long ago, but the old days with a lot of love, because you could identify one person, you could go and engage with them, pitch to them, propose to them, and close to them. Now you can't do that. Sales cycles have got longer with it. So, and one of the biggest problems is they're bombarded. They're bombarded with information. They're bombarded with the amount of projects, because a lot of the time these buyer teams have got less people to make more decisions. So buyer enablement's this terminology. I'm assuming it was Gartner that derived it. I think Forrester have something called revenue enablement. But I tag myself under buyer enablement, but it's just another bit of buzzword bingo. It is just another terminology which sort of talks about a method for trying to help people to buy. So it's still selling. By the way, I hate the term modern selling. Modern selling. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's current selling. It's not modern selling. It's current selling.
I always had this law. It's like, you may know how to sell, but your client doesn't know how to buy.
Especially complex sales. They might buy what you sell every 5 or 10 years. They don't have a process.
Right? And then they may say, okay, well, give me a proposal, which is the death nail of a deal, because they're going to take it, email it to their boss with the title, great idea. And the boss goes, yeah, I've got a whole folder full of great ideas. And then you're following up. And it's like, no, they don't know how to buy. They don't know how their internal organization works, the politics, the finance, their internal quagmire of getting things done. And what they do is they give up. They act like they work for the government. They're like, we should do this, but you know what it's like around here.
Yeah. So the buying, I mean, I say to people, selling's tough, but buying's tougher. And
it's their
guys think, what are you talking about? And you've got to help people to buy. And you're like, what do you mean help them to buy? I struggle enough helping them, selling. But I say, stop trying to sell and start trying to help them to buy.
Yes.
And they think that's counterintuitive. But buyer enablement, the terminology they use, they sort of start saying, right, this is about understanding where the different people in the buyer committee are in the buyer journey, to give them the right information at the right time to enable them to complete the task or job at hand, and offering them different perspectives. And you're like, okay, yes, but before you get to that stage, if you don't know what you need to know about them, then you don't know where they are in the process. So think about the process. We all know that the buying process is chaotic, and we've seen the great charts that sort of summarize that. But if you ask sales guys, what's the customer's buying process? The number one thing they'll tell you is when they've told them they're going to make a decision. Why? Because they need it for their forecast, and also it's countdown to commission. And
that's it. I make a bunch of videos. I don't ask people what their buying decision, their process is. Why? Because they don't know. So they're going to tell you something that's wrong. You're going to base a strategy off of something that's wrong. What are they going to say? I'm the final decision maker. Person that's got zero budget authority, zero signature. And people don't seem to understand, just to get, 50, 100K out of a company, you've got to go really high. And even those people are going to contact people that aren't even in the company, board members, previous employees, friends.
And it takes people out of the comfort zone when you start doing that. They, whoa, that's not where I want to play. But going back to the process, I say to people, right, have you looked at maybe your last 5 deals and tried to document what happened? What did your customers go through internally before they finally started? And they go, no, they don't know. And that amazes me, because then you, the seller, can say, look, in our experience, companies like you, these are the sort of things you're going to go through. These are the sort of people you get on board. These are sort of questions they're going to ask you. These are sort of objections you might encounter. This is the sort of information you might want to share with other people in the buyer committee, to build consensus. And sales guys go, well, is that really our job? It's my job to tell them what we do. And they said, no, it's your job to close the deal.
Right.
What you need to do
is on education is not very high.
So it's smart guys have always been this way. They've always been about, I'm going to walk a mile in the buyer's shoes. I'm going to help them understand, I'm going to do what I can. And that's why, I always had a high hit rate. My ratio of closed deals as a sales guy was really high. And part of it, well, here's the funny thing is people used to say to me, and by the way, that there's an end to this that doesn't make me sound arrogant. People used to say to me, Kevin, why is it you're so good? And I used to say, well, is it because I'm that good, or everyone else just makes me look good? Yeah. And I think it was because everyone else was so poor, they made me look good. I was nothing special, but I was different to everybody else because I was more buyer-centric even then, 20, 30 years ago. And now it's more important than ever.
Yeah, because I think in most cases, the managers and the leadership try and manage the complex sale like the simple sale. Build up a huge pipeline so your win rate is better. Well, the people who are really good understand there's only a few people going to buy. How many deals do you have to do this quarter? If you got to do 5, having 15 or 20 deals doesn't help you. You have to go deeper on
dilute your effort. Yeah. It's because most of the time, most sales guys smoke opium and they just stuff their pipeline full of stuff that isn't really, well qualified. It isn't really, it's because then everyone judges them on, hey, that's right, you've got a 1 in 4 ratio, you've got 1 million. Okay, that's a 4 million target. Well, and then guess what? It's stuff full of stuff. It's no relevance. And it distracts everybody. I'll tell you a story. I took over a VP sales role in a major organization. And the first thing I did is a sweep, a clear out of the pipeline. Yeah. And there was about 40%. And, I was carrying circa $180 million target. Wow. And I removed 40% of it. Because I said, look, if it's going to, and then the CEO came back to me and said, put it back. The board is going to kill me. And I'm like, well, that's the wrong mindset, but it sort of shows that most people's pipeline is full of stuff. And I think it's perpetuated by the attitudes of sales leadership and all the way up, whereas nobody wants to take the crap out because it exposes how fragile their pipeline is. But the reality is if you trim it down to what you could really win and focus on it, and then start working with the extended buyer committee, your probability is going up. If it's well qualified and you're doing what you need to do to help them to buy. And on that note, one of the other things about buyer enablement, and you probably experienced it. I've done it in the past. We bombard people with information. It's almost like, I'm going to email you everything I can and pick the bones out of that. You might find some golden nuggets in those. And they don't. They just bin it. They don't read it. Because it's not.
And there's a whole market today about just-in-time content, and you're like, do you understand? Nobody reads this stuff.
Yeah. But having it on point for that person, for what they're trying to do, relevant to them, and showing that it's not contrived and biased stuff that promoting your product, because they'll sniff through that really quickly. Yeah. Stuff that helps them address the specific task in hand. Yes. Don't think about, I'm going to give them stuff that's going to make them choose us now. It's about, there's a process to follow. It's a long process. It's a long journey. Be patient.
Are you finding that you're more in the training business than the technology business?
No, not. Do you know, I end up
not by design, but by.
Oh, yeah. Look, when I look at the whole sales training world, so there are visionaries and gurus and that, and I'm a disciple. I'm not a visionary or guru. I'm just a disciple. I learn from I always say that one of my greatest assets is my ability to do a frontal lobotomy on someone and take out what I need from them and spin it myself. And then I try and share that with others. I try and say, look, from my experience in selling, which is extensive, and although I say that 35 years in selling experience, 25 years of it is probably no longer relevant, maybe even more. And I hate when you get the profiles of people saying, take that down. It's not relevant. But so I like understanding this beautiful profession of ours.
Yeah.
And always every year being on my toes saying, well, last year was good, but this year's going to be different. What have I got to do different to stay ahead? And it's not about product or service differentiation. It's about you differentiation,
Yeah.
how you're helping people.
But I look at your product and I go, I get it because I understand the problem. But I got to imagine showing it to a VP of sales. They're like, oh, we should be doing this.
You know, here's the thing. I sort of say, because buyer relationship management is really about capturing, managing, action reviewing, sharing all the important things, because selling's a team sport now. And they all go, yeah, we absolutely have to have this, because sales guys come and go, and most of the time the intel goes with them, and then you lost momentum in the deal and you're screwed. But capturing that beautiful bit of information, keep it in-house. And then they go, do you know what? I'm not sure I could get my sales guys to fill that in. And I sort of bite my lip and say, look, fella, this is not a bloody democracy. This is not an optional thing. They don't own that relationship. They don't own that knowledge. If they want to get better, look, I love salespeople. I love sales leaders. This is not a popper either. But salespeople need to get better. Sales leaders need to get better. Sales people need to understand what they need to do to get better, and sales leaders need to coach and advise them to do it. Buyer relationship management is just a means. It's a simple ability to capture that, and it's not just that. We look at the whole buyer perspective from three elements. One, the engagement. What do you know about the who, why, what, when, and how, and the dynamics internally, relationship mapping, and all of that. Secondly, the collaboration. How are you working with their buyer team to help them through that chaos that is the buying process? Yeah. And finally, win, lose, or no decision, get some bloody feedback. What did you do well as a salesperson? What do you need to improve upon? So it is everything from the buyer's perspective. And it is a difficult thing to get sales leaders to embrace it, because they're tainted with this CRM is really tough to crack. Why would I, be able to get this tough crack? And I say, well, sales guys don't see how CRM helps them, but they see how our product helps them.
Well, that's what I meant by the training part, that switch, because once you start looking at what you're doing, kind of the map of the account, the players versus the dashboard of activity, yours is about what to do and how to do it, where the dashboards just do something and hope that something happens. Number of calls, number of presentations.
Absolutely. That, for me, it's about, what do you understand about it? Because, people say, oh, you've got a sales methodology. And I said, well, no, I haven't.
Oh, no. Hopefully you have a sales methodology.
Yeah, but sales methodology, but they all say, what are you Miller Heiman blue sheets, gold sheets? I said, I haven't got a clue, never seen them. What I try and do is say, here's the fundamentals, what you should know in any customer engagement. And because there's an expression someone just told me, and they said that you've got all these different sales methodologies, but they're like Mexican food. They're all called something different, but they all taste the same. But it is a great way. But at the end of the day, they are. Everyone. So I'm just saying, no, I'm not going to force you to live a methodology or a process. This is about how do you capture the fundamentally important things about the deal you're trying to win, about the business drivers, the process, and the people involved.
Well, this is it. And I think it's a great point that very few people understand, is that this is the job. Your job is to sell, not to present, not to propose, not to demo, not just to build a relationship. Those are all elements. If they don't buy and you feel comfortable with no decision, which means no order, no commission, this is the problem that we're really trying to solve.
Yeah, no decisions is one of the biggest areas of opportunity for any sales guy.
Well, what does that mean to you? What does no decision mean to you?
Generally, it means that the buyer team wasn't aligned enough to make a decision, to agree. They couldn't build consensus, or there was nothing really that solved the business problem better than what they do today. And in our win-loss feedbacks, now we don't see the confidential element, but we get a summary of it. And one of the questions that we ask in our win-loss sales performance feedbacks is, how well do you think our salesperson understood your business problem? And you know what? It's less than 25%.
Right. Well,
Less than 25% of people in the buyer team are saying, we really think they understood our business problem.
but then, okay, if there was no decision, so was there a business problem? How else did you solve it? Or you didn't solve it, you're going to live with it.
Yeah, well, do you know, there's when they say a business problem, you know, sometimes we all know there's varying degrees of impact of a business problem. Unless it's a high impact problem that puts business risk or cost at stake, it's probably going to get kicked down to the nice to haves. And that's why I always say that's part of qualification. You know, how serious a problem is this? You know, and there's was it Keenan's book is and we have this in our product already. You know, what's the problem? What's the impact? What's the root cause? What's the symptoms? Understanding all of that, it sounds like overkill for a lot of sales guys. But if you don't understand that, then you don't understand how much of a business problem it is. And that means you don't know whether this is going to be a deal that happens or not. You know, I always say dig deeper, that earliest opportunity.
Right. That there's got to be somebody who has that problem that's going to help you champion this thing through. That if they don't solve this problem, their life is going to be miserable. You know, because in the committee, you know, probably most of them don't have the problem. They're willing to finance it. They're willing to support it. But you got to have the screaming kid who's hungry now. We're not going to eat when we get home. We got to eat now. You know,
I speak to a lot of buyers. And one of the things is all sales guys, we all do, yeah, do you know what? It's about creating an opportunity to go in and make people aware they've got a business problem or a potential business problem coming on. So it's one of the questions I ask all the buyers I talk to, say, how often is an internal project generated by external activity created by a sales guy who creates awareness that you got this? And the harsh reality is rarely ever. Yeah. Rarely ever. Most sales guys wait for the buyer to make them aware, the seller aware there's a problem, there might be an opportunity, and it might be someone in the technical department start talking or, you know, whatever it might be. But very few deals, well, not enough deals are self-generated, which is quite disturbing because, you know,
yeah, I mean, it's hard to do. It's the hardest part of it.
Totally.
We're delegating it to the people with no experience.
Yeah, but then we all know that the first person to show value has got an increased chance of winning a deal and all those things. And that as soon as people talk about needs discovery, well, if there's already momentum, it's not needs discovery. They've got defined needs. They'll tell you what they are, and they'll tell your competitors what they are. Yeah. But going back to, there are great opportunities there to get in early. But also, if there is we haven't made a decision, we can't make a decision, it's status quo, then the window of opportunity to say, right, what did we do in here? Why did they get to that no decision outcome? How can we reverse engineer that? Say, well, we'll approach some of these no decision deals in a different way, because products and service or solution differentiation is really quite difficult now. Doesn't matter what you've got, you know, it's really difficult. Yeah. The buying experience is a differentiator if it's done well.
Then it dies because nobody is championing it. Nobody's sticking their neck out. Nobody knows how to do it internally. And all we do is follow up and hound them to death. They lie to us. We get comfortable. The end of the quarter comes. We throw in a discount. And maybe that entices somebody to do something, but rarely does.
Throwing a discount, that's not discounting. That's what salespeople call negotiation. Anyway, negotiate to them is, how much do I reduce my price to get the deal? And once again, I'm not having a pop at sales guys. It's the way it is. Sales leaders allow it to happen. Whole organizations aren't supporting sales guys. So it's a perpetual problem across everybody. You know, it distresses me when I see it, because there are some fantastically successful companies that still have a bad approach to selling and that, but their product is so compelling that the numbers, you've still got the hockey stick growth. But my view is, forget how successful you are, is how successful could you be if you did things better.
Yeah, it's that margin, because if you look at everybody's comp plan, it's not front end loaded, it's always back end loaded.
Totally.
That's where the money is. Hey, this has been a great conversation. Where can people go to learn about you, your company, and your product?
Well, the usual. So the company's Boxstep, and it's BOXXSTEP.com. Get hold of me via email, kevin@boxstep.com, or usual place, LinkedIn. I'm not really big on Twitter, but LinkedIn's my thing.